Alright, welcome to our second installment of Chapter 6. I know it's a little bit dark and you probably can't see my face as I'm doing this. That's because I'm filming at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you guys are hopefully getting yourselves ready for a great day of school. But I've got no light coming in side, and if I turn on the overhead lights, then it drowns out the images, so I apologize. So, the human population and its impact. Let's see. Let's begin with fertility rates. So we have a few different types of fertility rates that we're going to look at. First one is replacement level fertility, which is the number of offspring needed to replace parents. So that is 2.1 in developed countries and 2.5 in developing countries. So first off, why is it above 2 in any country? And then why is developing countries, why is it higher there than in developed? So replacement level fertility, again, if you're talking about replacing the parents, there's 2 parents to make a child, right? So if each couple that comes together has 2 kids, then they've replaced themselves, right? Because there's 2 parents, you need 2 kids to replace you. Now, it would be nice if every single parent who had children, if their children, their offspring survived to reproductive adulthood, but that doesn't always happen. In developed countries, it's less likely to happen than in developing. So most of the time in a developed country, you have your kids, you raise them, and they make it to reproductive adulthood, and they have their own children. And once that happens, then there's success. You pass on your genetics. But in developing countries, the likelihood of one of your children passing due to disease, famine, conflict is much higher than in a developed country. So just to ensure that 2 make it to reproductive adulthood, 2 of your children, on average people have to have 2.5. Now again, that's not 2 children and then arm and a leg, right? This is just an average number. Next one is total fertility rates. The average number of children born to women in an area during their reproductive years. So this has nothing to do with trying to replace just the parents, just how many children are the women in your country having? What's the expected family size based on society and culture? So again, this is the data that you see in your textbook. This is the data that is now current, the most current data that we could find. So you see U.S. have gone from total fertility rates of 2.1 down to 1.9. Now let's compare some of these really quick. Let's look at U.S., Canada, Germany. These are developed countries, and you can see that our fertility rates are all under the replacement level fertility. So our total fertility, the number of children that the average female is having there, is below 2, or 2.1 for a developed country. So it means that we are having less children than we need to replace the people in that country. And we'll talk more about that later. And if you look at the developing countries, Nigeria, that's 7.6, India 2.5, Bosnia and China have done a lot of things to try and keep their populations low. And if you look at China in and of itself, you guys are familiar with the one-child policy. And it's done a great job in keeping their populations lower and trying to reduce their growth rate. But we're going to read an article later on that talks more about some of the other ramifications of having a one-child policy, especially in a paternal society that values men over women. How does that affect the relationship of how many females there are in the country to how many men there are in a country? And when those men try to get a wife, are there enough women for those men, right? So we'll talk more about that later. But again, just make note that here in the United States, we are now under our 2.1 replacement level fertility. We're at 1.9. Okay, so case study. The U.S. population is growing rapidly. So despite the fact that we have a total fertility rate that is under our replacement level fertility, we still have a large population, and they're still reproducing, which adds to the population. So we are growing faster than any other developed country right now. And again, if you look back at Germany and Canada, you can see that our total fertility rates are much higher than theirs. So we are the fastest growing developed country. And a lot of it has to do with our population explosion that happened post-World War II, and this is known as the baby boomers. So our population in the United States has increased, has fourfold increased since 1900, and what happened during post-World War II was we had this feeling of well-being. We were one of the only remaining superpowers. The economy was starting to boom. So the standard of living really started to increase, and people could afford, coming out of the Depression, to now have more children and take care of them. So we had a small boom, population explosion there. So now we're also having a longer life. So these baby boomers, who a century ago would have all passed off, died at this moment, are now still living, and we've got great medication to keep them alive. So what we're going to do right now is take a look at this website and see what is going on with the baby boomers. So this right here, we'll start with Japan. You can see this is tracking Japan's change in population over the last, and projecting it out into the future a little bit. It's projecting it to 2050, starting in 1950, so that's 100 years. If you look over to the left-hand side, this is the share of the population, and it's broken up into different cohorts, age groups. So this is the 0 to 4 age group, 5 to 9 age group right here. And as you can see, starting in 1950, the majority of Japan's population was in this area. So wait for it to come back. Boom, there it is. Right? And that meant that their population was growing very, very rapidly. And it did for a long time, until they started to slow down their growth. And we'll talk about how that happened in just a little while. And now there's some implications of that. Now if we scroll down here to the United States, you can see a couple things. One, we had a lot of the population here. Now we're starting to get a lot more of a population into the adult ages, and this little ripple right here going through is our baby boomer. Right, there we go. Here it comes. Right, moving across the screen. That is our baby boomer age. And those people, like I said, in the past would have passed away, but we're keeping them alive with medicine and good drugs, good medical care. All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, total fertility rates for the U.S. between 1970 and 2008. So you can see it coming out of the early 1900s, the births per woman were pretty high. And that was a little more normal because a lot of these children were used in the farm. They were used to help their parents. They were used as kind of health care for their parents to take care of them when they got older. And then during this time frame right here, we've got the crash, right? The Great Depression. It was very difficult to raise children. So the number of children per woman went down dramatically. Okay? Now you get through post-World War II, and we've got a higher standard of living, more money going across the board. People were alive to remember this period of time, so they're taking advantage of the new resources, and the population goes up, right? And then it starts to come back down. And we're kind of leveling off towards our replacement level fertility. So what caused this decline? And that's what we're going to look at next. So why is fertility declining in some areas? We'll look at some economic reasons here. So we moved from a labor to service market. So the children are no longer needed to work in factories, okay? And that's in developed countries. In developing countries, a lot of times children still work in the factories. For example, in India in 2009, in a study done, they found that there were 253 million, that's almost the population of the United States, 253 million children ages 5 to 14 working full-time jobs in factories. And I promise you that a factory in India is not up to par, I guess, with a factory in the United States of America. Far more dangerous. The increased education of women has raised their earning power and increased the opportunity cost of childbearing and child rearing. So, to this day, women still make less than a man per hour of work. I think it's 77 cents on the dollar is the rough estimate. And a lot of that is because when somebody is hiring, they say, oh, if I hire this female, then I'm going to eventually have to let her go because she's going to be having kids soon, right? So, women have either delayed their child rearing, right? Instead of having children in their 20s, which was normal back 30 years ago, now they're waiting until their late 30s, sometimes early 40s to have their children, because they're trying to use that early part of their life to really forward their career. Or they're just deciding not to have children at all. Alright? So the best way to reduce an area's fertility rates, like if we go into these developing countries, and we can bring them all sorts of information and different cultural changes, but the most important thing we could do to decrease total fertility rate in an area with a large total fertility rate is to educate their women. Give the women opportunities. And then lastly, the increased cost of raising and educating children. Right now, because of our different views of what children need, what type of house we should live in and what we should provide them, the cost of raising a child has increased dramatically. So it is estimated right now that from the ages of 0 to 18, it costs $250,000 to raise a child. Now that does not include college, weddings, and all those other things. That's just getting them to the age of 18. So think to yourself right now, are you a only child? Are you one of 2 children? One of 3? One of 4? Alright, so if you're one of 4, that means your parents are going to be shelling out $1 million over the span of you and your brothers and sisters becoming 18 to raise you guys. That's expensive. So it's difficult to have more than a few children, more than a couple children. And pension systems. Okay. I have a pension system working here for, I'm working for the state of Florida because I'm a public school teacher. We have a pension system. Other companies and jobs have pension systems or 401k plans. And these are set up so when you get older and retire, you have money to survive and to live off of. You do not rely on your children to take care of you because you have a pension. So you don't need to have 7 kids and some of them are all going to take their turns taking care of you when you get old. Alright, non-economic reasons. Improve contraceptives and access to them. This is important, especially in developing countries, getting the contraceptions and the awareness of them and how to use them out to women. Again, educating them, giving them control of their reproductive potential. The availability of legal abortions. Reduced child mortality. Now, childhood mortality is based on, for every 100 live births, how many of those are going to die within the first year? That number is childhood mortality. And when later on when we talk a little bit more about this, we'll discuss how being bipeds has really made it difficult. Bipeds, meaning we walk on 2 legs. It makes it very, very difficult to have children. And in the past, pre-medical intervention, it wasn't uncommon to have 50% of children die from infant mortality. So that's significant. Now we've really, really reduced that, especially in developed countries. And then increase in the average age of women. If you're not getting married now until, like for example, in the United States, the average age of marriage for a female is 27 and 30 for a male. In Europe, it is just over 30 for men and women. And then contrast that with a developing country like Afghanistan, where it's about 20 for women is the average age of marriage. Now, if you're getting married at 20, it's expected that you'll probably start procreating, right, and having children. So if you are reproductive till you're 40, if you're getting married at 20, that gives you 20 years to potentially bring children into the planet, right? If you're not getting married until you're 30, now that gives you only 10 years, right? So just when you get married has a huge impact on how many kids you are physically able to bring into the planet. And since developing countries tend to marry younger, they have longer periods of time to bring in children. So this little map right here is just a visual display of when people are getting married. The darker the green, the later the people are waiting. It's all the way up to about 35 years in these dark green areas. Us over here is right about, they're averaging the 27 for females and 30 for men together. And then you can see these light green areas are 20 or younger. Okay, so factors affecting death rates. People live longer, infant mortality rate is decreasing. So you can see this is the age, life expectancy for females, life expectancy for males. Here we are in the United States right there. Our life expectancy on average is about 78 for women, 74 for men. Go back to 100 years ago, and the life expectancy was about 47, and now it's gone up to, on average, 78. Expected to go to 82 by 2050. So 82 years old for a female in the United States by 2050, which is impressive. Right now, you can see Japan, the average age for a female in Japan is, 86 roughly? And then contrast that with Afghanistan, where it's only 46. Look at this one right here, Angola, 40. It's crazy, think about that. 40 years old is the average lifespan for people in Angola, and 46 for people in Afghanistan. Super duper sad. Migration affects the population size. Of course, as people migrate seeking jobs and economic improvement, which is why we have a significant immigration. We have significant immigration into the United States of America. So if you, again, going back to where we discussed our total replacement fertility, which is 1.9, it would be even lower than that if total fertility is 1.9, and it would be lower than that if we did not account for immigration. Immigration adds to our population. And technically, for capitalism to work, we have to be above, you don't want to be much above it, but above replacement level fertility, which is 2.1. So with a total fertility of only 1.9, that means eventually our population growth in the United States will slow and will decline. And when that happens, that will be bad for capitalism, which has to continually grow. As a matter of fact, places in Germany, if you remember there, I think the total fertility rate was 1.4. They are actually starting to experience that now. It's been at 1.4 for long enough that they're seeing an impact in their economic system. The majority of their population is older. There's not enough young people who have been born recently to take care of that older population. So they are incentivizing the birth of children. Some places are giving bonus checks from the government to people who have more children. They will save your job for you if you're a female for 3 years. So if you have a child, you can take 3 years off, your job will be guaranteed for you, and during the time frame you are still paid about 60% of the salary you would have earned if you were working. Then you return to the workforce and go back to your full-time job after 3 years. Okay, let's see. Political oppression, wars, environmental damage, of course these all have an impact on an area's population. And if you think about what's going on in Syria right now, there has been lots and lots of deaths, unfortunately due to conflict in that area, and that's a sad way to see people pass. And again, these are things that you usually see in developing countries, okay? And we do have a lot of environmental damage here in the United States, of course, but we have better ways of dealing with it. And in a lot of developing countries, it's the extremely poor who bear the main burden of this environmental damage. And that is that. So, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you at section 6.3.